I'll keep this short so you can enjoy the reading. Firstly, thank you all for 300 subscribers. This is a somewhat dramatic reading of an as of yet unnamed fanfic which a friend of mine wrote. The art is by the always great Titancore. Check him out in the links in the description and shower him with praise for me. This takes place during the near future. The sound of swords clashing filled the air as two Dracuses fought against a very strange alicorn. This alicorn was carrying a blade with dragon-like print, but it was surrounded by a dark aura. Then this alicorn sent the two Dracuses flying into a wall, knocking them out cold, and then there was another alicorn named Bloodrose. She was carrying a blade with a dragon print on it, but with a glowing white aura around it. She tried to fight the alicorn but wasn't able to hold the other alicorn off, and so the other alicorn sent Bloodrose flying, and she was still conscious but was too hurt to move. So the other alicorn named Joseph was about to grab Clover, Bloodrose's daughter, when Joseph heard someone yelling at him, so he turned around and saw a much older and larger Dracus than the other two, and Joseph recognized this Dracus as Shadowstrike, Clover's uncle and the hero of gods. Shadowstrike yelled at Joseph, "Leave Clover alone and face me." Joseph then said, "Fine, you want to fight? Let's fight." Shadowstrike said, "I have the power of the gods, what power do you have?" Joseph replied, "I have the power of the sacred beasts." "Fine then," said Shadowstrike, "let us use our blades and the winner is allowed to keep Clover. Do we have an agreement?" "Fine, I accept these conditions, now let us fight." Shadowstrike pulled out his blade, the dragon blade of blazing lightning, and charged at Joseph. Joseph pulled out his dark dragon blade and blocked Shadow's attack. But then Joseph's blade began to crack, and it shattered into two pieces. However, Joseph then pulled out a new blade, the Dark Affinity blade, and countered Shadow's attack, and slammed Shadow into a wall, which hurt Shadow severely. Then Joseph thought that Shadow was defeated and was about to take Clover, when he saw Shadow grab his blade and lift himself up. But Joseph laughed at Shadow, saying that Shadow couldn't protect anyone, and then Joseph ran over to Shadow and kicked him in the chest. But Shadow wouldn't go down, and that's when it happened. Shadow suddenly said, "You are not going to hurt Clover, I won't let you take her." Then Shadow looked at his sons, the two Dracuses, and his sister, Bloodrose, and said, "I fight for the ones I love, now it's time for you to pay." Then Shadow was suddenly surrounded in a bright ball of light, and was floating in mid-air, but when the light disappeared, Shadowstrike was standing again. But his mane and tail were aflame, and his body was surrounded by an electric aura, and Shadow's sword was now the Infinity Blade of blazing lightning. Twin Shadow said, "I fight for those I love, now you're going to pay for harming them." That's the way you want to fight me? Then fine, let's go, said Joseph. Then he was surrounded in a ball of darkness. After the ball disappeared, Joseph had changed. His body was now black with purple stripes, and his eyes were a green color, and his mane and tail were now made out of black flames, and his blade had black lightning in it. "Well," said Shadowstronger, "I see the beasts gave you an ultimate form now, didn't they? Well then, let us fight, good vs evil, my power of the gods vs your power of the beasts." And so they continued fighting, one representing the light, and the other representing the darkness. Then Shadow took his blade, and with a mighty war cry, he brought down his sword on top of Joseph's sword. But Joseph just blocked it. But due to Shadow's strength, Joseph's blade was shattered, and Joseph tried to fight Shadow even without the blade. So Shadow made the decision to end Joseph. But Joseph had reconstructed his blade, and the two warriors took their positions and ran at each other with their blades. However, Joseph was hit first, so he fell over, and he said he had one final wish, and his wish was to say goodbye to Clover. So Shadow hoisted Joseph onto his shoulder, and helped Joseph walk over to Clover, and then Joseph said goodbye to her. And he said to Shadow, "Please tell Clover that I always loved her." And then Shadow laid Joseph down and said, "Rest easy, my fellow warrior, rest easy." Then Joseph was dead, so his body disappeared, but the Dark Infinity Blade remained. When Bloodrose woke up, she asked Shadow what happened to Clover and where Joseph was. So he told her that Clover was still safe and sound, and that Joseph was dead, but that his final words were, "Please tell Clover that I always loved her." Bloodrose then shed a single tear and said, "Thank you, brother, for keeping Clover safe." "Now I need to get my boys fixed up," said Shadowstrike. So Bloodrose carried the red and black Dracus known as Blaze into the house and laid him on the bed in the spare bedroom, and Shadowstrike carried the yellow and black Dracus known as Bolt into one of the bedrooms and laid him on the bed. Shadowstrike was then enveloped in a ball of light, and he returned to normal, and then Shadow walked out into the living room where Bloodrose was with Clover. But before he could sit down with them, he blacked out and fell over due to exhaustion and a huge gash along his side and a gash on his forehead. Luckily, at this very moment, his sons, the two Dracuses, woke up and rushed into the living room when they heard their Aunt Bloodrose calling for help. When they got into the living room, they saw their father lying on the floor, with blood pooling from his wounds, and his breathing was shallow. And they saw their aunt trying to lift Shadow up and put him on the couch in the living room. Then she told Blaze to grab Clover and take her into the room and keep her company. Now, Bolt, your father told me that you are experienced with wounds and healing them. Help me fix your dad up. Then Bolt ran to the bathroom and grabbed the emergency first aid kit and gave the bandages to Bloodrose. And she bandaged Shadow up and managed to stop the bleeding. So Bloodrose told Bolt to go keep an eye on Blaze and Clover, and so he went into Clover's room. But Shadow wouldn't wake up. Then there was a blinding flash of light from Shadow's sword and from his bass guitar. After the light disappeared, there stood two transparent ponies. One was a black Pegasus with a yellow mane and tail, and the other was a black unicorn with a silver mane and tail. And then they introduced themselves. The unicorn said his name was Scratch, and that he was an old Fear-End of Shadows. And the Pegasus said he was Lightning, and he too was an old Fear-End of Shadows. When they saw Shadow, lying there on the couch, wrapped in bloody bandages and unconscious, they gasped and asked what happened, so Bloodrose filled them in on what happened, and they were completely speechless after she told them what happened. Then they said they had sensed something was wrong with Shadow. And that's when their eyes changed and became dragon eyes like Shadow's. And they said they were created by the dragon gods, like Shadow was, and that's why they could sense something was wrong with him. But then Shadow woke up and weakly sat up slowly, and smiled when he saw his old friends had come. Opening bracket, Lightning and Scratch can only be seen by Bloodrose and Shadow, closing bracket. Then there was a huge crash as the door was kicked in by a black and blue female Dracus, who Shadow instantly recognized as his sister, Rain. She stomped in and then she saw Shadow and asked him, "What the hell happened to your brother?" "'Cause I was just hanging around my place when I suddenly had a sharp pain in my heart, and I knew it had something to do with you, brother." So Shadow told her, and then her gaze softened and she lowered her tone. And then there was a worried look in her eyes. And then she said, "Oh brother, why did you fight him? Why?" Shadow replied, "Sis, I did it to protect my Nessie, Clover. Would you like to meet her and your nephews?" And she said, "Wait, what? When did you get the kids, and when did you get a Nike?" Then Shadow said, "Oh, you haven't met Bloodrose, have you? She is my older sister, don't ask about the whole kids thing, okay?" Okay.